So, yeah, I believed I was a tree.
The following video does not glorify drug use, but instead it intends to educate people and create awareness leading to harm reduction by discouraging the abuse of drugs, and maybe even harm elimination by discouraging drug use altogether. This video shows some of the effects psychedelic substances can have on the mind while also highlighting what causes those specific effects or outcomes. However, with that being said, these are random people. Please don't make decisions based on what they say without your own due diligence, and also take note that these substances affect everyone differently, especially those with pre-existing mental conditions.
The third story in what I wrote about is probably my most profound experience, and that was definitely heavily impacted with the music that I was listening to, I believe. Number 4 on my writing thing. I was listening to Lemon Jelly, and I believe that had a huge impact on it. I believed I was a tree. Yeah, and it's probably the most amazing, that particular trip out of all of them, and this is a mushroom trip, and it was probably close, if not over the 5 gram mark, because yeah, it was we got a lot of it, and we got a lot for pretty cheap. I'm pretty sure they were cubes as well, and yeah, that was probably the single most profound experience with psychedelics for me. And it wasn't a dark one, it wasn't a horrible one. There was dark elements to it. There was strange elements. So I don't know if you know this, but magic mushrooms have been illegal in the UK since the 70s. There was a time, there was like a grey area in the law. There was like a loophole in the law which said if you dry them out, if you dehydrate them, that constitutes creating a Class A drug, which is Schedule 1 in the States. That's our equivalent, a Class A. So you could get them like fresh, and if you wanted to dry them out, that would be breaking the law. You could pick them as well fresh, as long as they're fresh, but if you dried them out. And so it was actually the day before the law passed to like make them illegal fully, because some stuff happened in Holland where loads of stuff happened. They had to make them illegal in Holland as well, and it kind of like went through Europe, and any kind of loopholes in the UK were also ironed out. And so the guy, it was like literally the day before the law passed, and so we went to one of these head shops, and the guy was like, "I've got to get rid of all of these." So you can have them all really cheap. So it's just me and one other guy that took them as well. So we just got loads for super cheap. So I'd say, and we ate them all as well. So I'd say we're going up to like the 4 or 5 gram mark here. And I think if I take, I think I was prepared for that as well. So it's just the way it happened as well.
How did that experience start? Like before you became a tree, like what was your intention going out there? You by yourself?
It was me and another friend. We'd decided to do it. We'd queued up the music. So that whole day kind of started. So this is like maybe 2004, 2005, something like that. So it was like the GameCube was out, if you remember the GameCube. We'd rented a Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube, and we'd played that all weekend, and we'd got the mushrooms or whatever. I remember we completed Resident Evil 4. I'm pretty sure it's Resident Evil 4. We needed to return it. We needed to return it to Blockbusters. So we'd rent it on like the game for the GameCube. We were like, right, okay, we finished the game. It didn't take very long. We just played it like we weren't tripping at this point, and then we'll eat these mushrooms. We got the game, got the mushrooms, and then we like finish the game, and then we'll return it. Then we ate these mushrooms, and we like went out. Well, we're playing for a bit, whatever. Then we went out to return it, and as we were walking to Blockbusters, I could feel it coming on. And I was like, shit, this is really strong, because I hadn't, like I mentioned before, I hadn't taken a trip for quite a few years since that LSD trip, the one that really scared me. So as we were walking to Blockbusters, I don't know if you've got Blockbusters in the States, you definitely don't now anyway. I could see like there were people like walking around, and I was feeling the mushrooms coming on, and they all look like these cardboard cutouts, like characters in Resident Evil. The graphics were like kind of they were kind of flat. They were kind of 3D, but they moved like weird and flat and shit. And that's what everything started to look like to me, like we're walking through Resident Evil. Drop the thing off, and we're like, fuck, it's coming up. I'm coming up, and got to get back to where we were staying. So we got back, got into my room, and we had a playlist ready. Hit play, and I just jumped on the bed, and I don't really remember the come up. I just remember that kind of part, getting back and sitting on my bed and like having the music come on. And then I know I was like sat on my bed, and I believe I was like sat on my bed like in the real world, like my arms stretched out as if I believe there were branches, and they come up as whatever. I don't know. And then I just remember that's like the purest part of the trip. That's the most like the most profound bit that I could take back with me. That I was this insanely large tree in like this massive forest. Or it wasn't even a forest. It was like this huge vista.
So that's where you perceived yourself being, but where were you physically again?
Oh, I was. We were in I think it was a uni dorm. Yeah, it was a uni dorm. It was like a uni accommodation. So we were like in my accommodation at the university. Basically, I believed I was a tree, and it wasn't only that. It was I could see in the vision of a tree. You know, like how we see in the way we see in like a kind of three-dimensional kind of way. The way the trees could see was kind of like all in dots. So there's some artists that do it. So like Van Gogh, it's like loads of colorful artists. It's called pointillistic art. So it's all dots basically, and it's like Van Gogh does some of it, and that's what basically what trees see. Obviously, trees don't have eyes, so but they can see or sense or whatever like 360 degrees because it's all around them. And yeah, I felt like enormous, man, and all of my vision was like 360 degrees all around me, and it was like it wasn't only vision. It was like I could feel like the emotions from everything around me, like not really emotions, but more like energy, just different energies from everything around me, and stuff like that. And I could see all the other trees, and I was all connected to all these trees and stuff like that. And yeah, everything was really bright, and all my vision were all these dots, and each dot had a different energy and a different feeling. I could feel like heats and temperatures, and I could taste things that weren't at all there. And during the trip, and this was definitely generated by the music, just kind of like the way the music was building and stuff like that. There was like on the horizon, I could see this dark cloud, like kind of engulfing all the trees in front of me. It sounds ridiculous, but as the cloud got closer, I could. It's another one of those kind of examples where not only was I seeing all this stuff, I was feeling these words like coursing through my body, and it was like it's like feminine voices moving through like my branches and stuff like that. And they were just telling me everything's okay, just go with it, and like just reassuring kind of words and stuff like that. And they were like singing to me, which were potentially generated by the music as well. And as this black cloud like engulfed the rest of the forest in front of me, it just kept getting closer. I got a little bit afraid. These voices just kept reassuring me that saying everything would be all right. And then eventually the black cloud like got to me and completely engulfed me. And at that point, that triggered like a well, it wasn't quite ego death yet, but it was complete ego dissolution because I wasn't aware of myself. You know, I was completely unaware that I was human. You know, I believed that my existence was this giant tree in this forest, and then so yeah, it basically obliterated me, and then I became something more than the tree. I became like pure consciousness or something. I became like that what we talked about earlier. I became like what people would describe as like a god or whatever, you know, this like omnipotent knowledge of everything. And at that point I understood every single thing. I understood it. It was like this understanding that you can't achieve with your mind, and it's one of those. And that kind of like omnipotence eventually like it triggered like a lot of like thought loops and things like that, and that also triggered like the complete ego dissolution, like ego death kind of experience that you hear about. So from there it just kind of like crushed everything. But this time, unlike a couple of the other times before, I wasn't actually that afraid because I also didn't know the term ego death at this time. I'd actually made my own term for it because I hadn't read into it or anything. I just called it loss of self. I mean, the thing is, the ego death is what they call ego death is interpreted so many different ways. And when I first started hearing of it, I had to research what it actually meant because I wasn't sure myself, and I wanted to research to understand if I had actually experienced it or if what I, from my research,
Your original
uh,
definition, loss of self, is pretty spot on.
is it loss of self or is it really becoming of true self? You know, is that the kind of idea? And that leads you on to all kind of
I
other
guess
things.
loss of what you perceive to be yourself.
Yeah. I don't really like the term ego death because of how often it's used and
It
how often
sounds
it's
so
like
negative.
yeah, exactly. The whole negative connotation to death as well. The actual definition, it comes up as like loss, what is it? A loss of subjective self-identity, complete loss of subjective self-identity. And it comes up in all types of traditions, man. It comes up, you know, what's it called in that kind of like Carl Jung psychology, they call it psychodeath. In a lot of like Eastern philosophies, it's called great death, where small death is the death of the body, and the great death is the death of the ego, and it comes up everywhere. It's just one of those things. And yeah, there's better terms for it. Yeah. And I think was it Timothy Leary that came up with the term ego death, or was it? It's one of those guys that always gets talked about. Anyway, I've kind of lost track now. But oh yeah, I was just saying I wasn't afraid as I was before. So in previous experiences when this happened, I got really afraid because I started to believe that I was going mad, like I was going crazy on previous experiences, but because I've had this particular experience before or something similar where like kind of reality is just being destroyed in front of me like really quickly, and there's like showing me that time doesn't exist and everything's insignificant, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't afraid. I was okay with it. I was more accepting. Whereas in the past, when I'd got to these states, I was like afraid. I was like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Is this what madness feels like, kind of thing. And this time I was more like, just go with it. And also the music kind of like generating, everything's gonna be fine. This is the way it should be. Yeah, and when I came down, when I realized, when I came back into my body, kind of thing, after the whole crushing overload of knowledge that I got, I remember being really disappointed that I was just a human in like a human form, that I wasn't like this giant tree anymore. I wasn't like this all-knowing super being or whatever. And yeah, then quickly all the knowledge that I thought I had, it just fucking disappeared, of course. It's like, I can't grasp that. Everything made sense for a second, and then yeah, just went back to normal.
Did you have any long-term effects from that experience, specifically where you became a tree?
Sounds ridiculous when you say like, when you became a tree man. Um, uh, I think that particular one made me feel really great because it just made me feel really positive, because the voices and the self assurance that I got, and it also relates to the DMT experience. That same feeling of kind of knowing that I was a decent person in the real world. That yeah, that I was kind of like, I wasn't like a bad person or anything. There was kind of like a reassurance there. I might have done some stuff in my life that I'm not particularly proud of, but fundamentally, there's nothing that I've done like a kind of malicious way to hurt anything or anyone. And that kind of same with the DMT, the most recent DMT experience. It's like that kind of idea. It was just kind of like a reaffirmation, like reconfirming this kind of idea for me. Yeah, I took that from that particular experience. Obviously, there's a whole kind of becoming a tree, but there's a huge moral as well. A lot of people get from psychedelics and stuff just about the world that we live in, and it kind of like told me that I was living the right life. Essentially, it kind of just said, continue in this kind of way you're going, and you're gonna be all right, type thing. And yeah, the most recent DMT trip as well just kind of just did the same thing for me as well. It reconfirmed those feelings, or that kind of message. See, the thing is, it's so hard to it's so hard to like go back, and because you don't remember everything. You can only remember, you barely, when you come out of the, when you're starting to come down, you still kind of remember it and you're still kind of grasping to it. But when it's worn off, like even the week later, you can only remember the most like profound parts of it, and you don't remember the details. A lot of the stuff I just told you about being a tree are things that I recited to people since, because that's probably my most told trip story I've told to different people over the years. And it's just, every time I tell it, I'm basically thinking of the last time I've told it, and I'm just reciting that every time, if that makes sense. I'm not remembering the trip itself, I'm just remembering what I've told people since.